One of the things that you asked us to provide you information on was preparedness. Okay, now, so this is one that Matt and I have talked about. We've both done a lot of research. I didn't realize it, but I've actually been kind of researching preparedness since 1969. You know, but I want to tell you something. Beware of people that's got lots of toys and lots of books and hadn't actually gone and done it. Okay, I'm in that class. I'm going to give you information that I've acquired, but you have to find it yourself and seek out actual experts. I am not an expert in this, okay? Just so we understand what we're talking about here. What are some of the things that go wrong? We've talked about the list of threats and stuff, but I did an analysis looking at our current situation. What is the most immediate problems or issues that we should be concerned about and what could it impact us? I sent it over to John Rivera and asked for his comments on it. He says, good to go, you know, so it's good. So the main two situations that we're looking at that could put us into a survival or preparedness situation right now is a terrorist attack and a pandemic situation. On the terrorist attack level, I'm sure you've already heard Judicial Watch, even the federal government now has issued warnings that ISIS has threatened to commit terrorist acts on or about 9/11. So somewhere in the window between 9/9 today and 9/13, they have threatened, and there's rumors amongst themselves and a lot of chatter that they're going to attack. They talked about along the border, but it could be a lot of different places. We know that ISIS is in Mexico. We have a lot of testimony and informed people saying ISIS is in the country. They've come across the border, come in many ways. Governor Perry has talked about it and others. Also, we just heard ICE and I'll admit that there's 6,000 people of concern that came in on student visas and just disappeared. And I think all of those pretty much are from the Middle East. So there could be any number of radicalized Islamists that have come here specifically to do hurt to America and to Americans. All right? The current estimate that I've been able to find out about is that ISIS is talking about using car bombs and truck bombs. And they said on the border, but I don't know how definitive that is. Okay? There's also information coming out that in those attacks they would focus on the power grid. And in research and reading about the power grid, and Matt and I came out of that industry, and he's still in it. Apparently there are 100 supercritical substations, and that's where the power is made at the power plant, is sent on the big lines, it comes down to a substation that then drops the voltage and sends it on to other parts where they drop it down again and it finally ends up at your house or your business. Well, everything comes in, it's like a node, comes in these substations, and they're all interlinked. Where we saw a presentation by a guy that there was some kind of a failure at a power plant in Florida. The transformer short out or something, and in microseconds, it threw the grid out in Ohio or someplace up north. Within less than a second, a problem in Florida blacked out Ohio. We're all tied together, and it's a very complex thing. I don't begin to understand it, but it's very complex. They say that there are 6 substations in the country that if you hit any one of these 100, if you got as many as 6 of them, you can put the entire country black. And that could black them out anywhere from a week to a few months, depending on what kind of equipment was damaged. The big transformers in the plant, they cost a few $1 million, and they take a year and a half or so to get one made. And they've only got so many spares. In fact, that's what our business was. When they would change out transformers, we would build the connection. But anyway, if they attack the power grid, that's a problem. It only seems reasonable that if they carry the attack past the car bombs and start attacking the grid, they're going to coordinate it with cyber attacks to take down our financial institutions and maybe also power plants and other structures. So if that's the case, on the terrorist thing, we run from really no real impact here in Mississippi. We're not a probable target of any kind, unless they really had a lot of places at one time they might hit the coast. The impact to us directly is probably almost nothing as far as an immediate impact. The impact it can have on the economy and long term, that's a whole other deal. If they do attack the power grids, well then you start looking at more serious problems. Depending on what areas got blacked out and what was the kind of damage, so what did it take them to get back. It can take anywhere from an hour to a month. Okay, so the duration's all over the place. And if the power grid goes down in our area, you all remember Katrina, when we lost power anywhere from 3 days. I was out 5, I think some places were out 2 weeks. And you start hitting the biggest problem there of your food shortages and your fuel shortages. Now that was mainly because we had all those people coming up from Katrina, doubling, tripling the demand here, and we had all those refineries down in the New Orleans area that quit producing gasoline, so there was a shortage and there was an over demand, and so y'all remember the 4-hour lines to get gasoline at 2 o'clock in the morning. If it interferes with the refineries and distribution, that can create those kind of shortages. Hopefully not as bad. Home food spoilages. If you don't have power at your house, what happens to your frozen refrigerated food? Okay? The biggest impact in such a thing is probably going to be on the sick and the elderly, though, because of the temperature. They can't, the air conditioning is so critical to so many people, or a little bit later on, the heat. Okay, this becomes an issue. And if it disrupts the distribution of food and fuel, and can coordinate with cyber attacks where you can have your banks go down, your ATM's not working, the EBT card's not working, stores not able to process orders on site, food not coming in. When you start combining the attack on the grid and the cyber attack, you can see some major disruptions in the supply chain and the availability, even the working of your digital money. If that happens, you can start looking at a lot of social unrest, rioting, looting, etc. I'm glad I'm in Brandon. If all that happens, I'm not going to have a whole lot of problem there, short term at least. Wherever you live, you need to judge your own situation and determine if those things begin to happen, what do you do? Okay? I've got a bunch of these, by the way. Man, if you get somebody to help pass those out. This is just a little assessment by little old me to give you some idea what we could be facing. The strongest estimate right now is there's just going to be some car bombs go off around the country. Be a lot of problem from that, but probably no immediate impact on us right here in Mississippi as far as interfering with your food or anything else. If the attack branches out to attacks on the grid and cyber attacks, you could be facing a lot more serious consequences. The other big threat is pandemic. And we have right now 2, actually 3 active threats going on. I'm sure you've seen in the news, if you're following, there's some kind of respiratory disease that they're not even quite sure what it is. And there's over 1,000 people in the hospitals that they're admitting to. And it's hitting mostly children, and it's hitting all over the country. So this is something that is looking like it could go out of control. And you connect that, we're going up into the flu season, stuff like that. Because that's always a concern. There are also, we have a threat from various diseases that are coming across our southern border with all these illegal aliens that are not going through the health checks and checking their vaccination records. And these kids are in our public schools, even here in Mississippi. And you do not know what diseases they're bringing with them. That's one of the reasons why what Obama has done is traitorous. He is not defending his country. He is deliberately open. I'm not going to get political. Anyway, so there's TB, there's polio, there's a bunch of other stuff coming in that you just never know when something like that could take. The plague is actually part of some of that these kids have. The third threat for the pandemic is Ebola. Now, this disease, they tried to downplay it. I found a 2007 analysis of how Ebola spreads, and even at that time, they were not sure. They kept saying it's only contact with body fluids, etc., like that. But even in that study back then, they said it very possibly could be airborne, they just didn't have the evidence. And right now in Africa, it's in, I think, 4 countries right now. It's got into, what is it, Johnson Town or something like this. Actually, a major town there in Guyana, I think. It's in 4 countries over there. A second strain has sprung up in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's exploding, it's growing exponentially. The mortality rate is still over 50%. Right now, they're starting, they're saying there'll only be a couple of thousand infected people. Now people are talking about it being over 100,000 people that could be infected, okay? And when it starts spreading like that, the possibility of it coming here, especially if it is airborne, and they're becoming more and more concerned about that as I read the articles, that it could be airborne spread. So people who come here and they're not in the outward stages, they're in the incubation stage, and then they start showing signs and not recognizing what it is, you know, it could start spreading like crazy. The big problem they're having in Africa, because if they can get the people good treatment, they reduce that mortality rate down, but they don't have the beds. They don't have a hospital capacity. They're very limited, or they're very primitive. Well, look, we're very advanced, but if you start having something major get here, our hospitals can't handle all this either. So this starts becoming a real threat, and you'll see some links down there about that. So that's the 2 levels of current threats, from not much of anything to a couple of weeks having a problem to, you know, you got to be careful where you go so you don't get really sick. What do? The number 1 rule in surviving crises and problems is don't be where the problem is. Okay? If they're going to be having riots on your block, you need to go see mom. You know, go move in with a friend until the riots are over, right? The same thing with all these conditions. You don't want to be where the problem is. To avoid being the problem, you want to not be where there's lots of people or where there could be violence. Okay? So where are those places? If we have problems from the terrorist attacks that we outlined, or we have problems from the pandemic, that's the food store, the gas store, wherever in congregations. To prevent you from being in those groups where you could end up in violence, or you could end up not being able to buy what you want because it's not on the shelves, or you could end up being infected with something. Have the supplies at your house already. And at a minimum, have 5 to 7 days worth of food and water. So if things get crazy, you sit home. Have you gassed, your car gassed up, have your generator. If you have a place to safely have a generator and you know how to use it without killing yourself with carbon monoxide or stuff like this, and you can store some gasoline, do that so you can keep your refrigerator. Maybe have a neighbor, if you're close enough, have one neighbor with a generator and string wires to the refrigerators. We did that in Katrina. I was running, well, not Katrina, a couple of years ago when we were out for a day or so. I had mine and 2 neighbors. I was taking care of their frozen foods. Okay? Work together. That's the key to success. But, you know, don't have to go out if you don't have to. All right? If you're concerned about the pandemic, you can go down to Home Depot, Lowe's, just about any place, and you can get the masks. And the better one to get, not the best, but the better one is called N95. And it means it'll get out 95% of all the things you have problems, even, I won't say gases, but explosive being gases and stuff. It gets rid of 95% of the stuff breathing out. You get the one with the little valve in it. But, you know, these start to get expensive. They're a couple of dollars a piece, you know, and you can buy packs. You can buy them online, things like this. Have you some heavy-duty gloves. Get you some surgery-rated gloves, you know, to handle stuff. Get some heavy gloves to work with stuff. Wear eye protection if you're around people. There's different things you can do. You can find a lot of information on this. Main thing then, stay informed and connected. You know, stay on the internet, stay watching the news, stay connected with Freedom Connect so you're getting good information and and you know when to do different things. It's very, very important that you know what needs to be done. I've been fooling with this and fascinated with it and worried about it. I got really worried about it right after I came to Mississippi. So nearly 14 years ago, I started really getting worried about something bad happening and started trying to learn, trying to get some stuff. Matt's got a presentation ready to go on water. Because here in the United States, shelter, warmth is not a big problem unless things got really crazy. Having good drinking water could be, especially in a long power outage, if they're not able to keep the pumps running and keep water coming to your house. So he's going to give you that. This is actually all my stuff. We'll talk about the different kind of filters, but I want to emphasize to you, preparedness is not complicated. Some scenarios get very complex, and they do get very complicated, how to prepare and how to survive. But mainly, most of the stuff you need is pretty simple. And folks, people have been surviving catastrophes, collapses, economic failures and currency collapses, war, revolution, tyrants, pandemics. People have been surviving this stuff for over 5,000 years. And it's not just been the rich that can buy lots of gadgets. The poor people have survived too, because survival at its core is very simple. You need some shelter, which can be a building or it can be the right clothes. You need fire, you need water, you need food, and many times you need some means of self-defense. It's real simple. This bag with a canteen and a little thing, it's got a steel cup in here and a little thing you put over your fire. Got a hose, a thing called life straw, some fire starting stuff, and a couple of little tools, and I can survive just about anywhere with that right there. But the biggest thing you need with any of this stuff is knowledge. You don't need a 100-pound backpack. You need knowledge more than anything else. And knowledge doesn't weigh anything. Okay? It's a great hobby. It can be a lot of fun. Especially if you're gadgets. I mean, all kinds of neat gadgets, knives, little knives. You know, I got books I can show you. If you want to know what the worst case scenarios end up looking like, a couple of these books will tell you. If you want to know how to really prepare for the end of the world as we know it, if you want to know how to live in the wilderness with nothing but your bare hands, if you want to know how to do a bug out bag 100 different ways, if you want to have extreme survival, okay? Here's a book on how to survive in the woods. It even has a compass in it. Fishing basics. You don't have to go kill a deer, just catch fish. U.S. Army Survival Sniper School, Survive Anything, Anywhere. Here's catalogs like Lehman's and Deep Cheaper Than Dirt, and a whole thing with weapons. You like toys with weapons, all they got stuff. Then here's all kinds. You want homestead, you want to live in the frontier, you want to just live off the grid, you want to defend yourself. You know, it goes on and on. This is the big new industry. And some of these new fancy magazines and stuff, oh, they're nice, got lots of pretty pictures, but not much information. They're really just a sales mechanism to show you all these pretty things to get you to buy them. But there's simple things you can do. Just know some basics. A map. Get some Thompson water spray. Spray your map so it's good out in the rain. If you do have to get home or do something that's not going to be ruined in the wet. Get you a Kindle or something similar with a longer battery life. Store all of your important documents on it. Get all the important information. Keep it in there. You know, because if you lose all the paper, if something really bad and you had to run, everything you got right there. I got all this, just about all my preparedness stuff on here. You know, put all the family records on there. Anyway, that's about it.
Well, like Roy said, there's a lot of topics in preparedness, and I'm by no means an expert either. You know, I've just been doing my research just like anybody else, and you know, as part of the kind of new education committee that Roy and I are kind of starting, this is our first topic, and certainly any input from everybody. I know we certainly have a lot of military people in here that have been, you know, trained and tested. Turn it up. Okay. They've trained and tested on this, so anything y'all can add, we'd love to. Once we figure out how we're gonna, you know, put this on the internet or you know make it more available as whatever documents we have, I'd love to add any input that y'all have. Anyway, I'm gonna start on water. Myself, I've right now, the only thing I have is food. I bought some dehydrated food. I have about a year's worth of dehydrated food for one person, which for 2 people, 2.5 people could do maybe 6 months. So I went and did that, but I've been kind of hesitant about other stuff. So I've recently been studying water and realized that water is probably one of the first things we should look at. Water's 90% of our body, and we can't go a couple days without water. And like Roy said, we've been so dependent on technology, and it's been such a good development for us, but it's also kind of our Achilles heel now that we're so dependent on our transportation system. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have known what a bottle of water was. I doubt it. So there's so much technology to look at, but just to understand basics of water, you know, what are we doing with water? Water, like I said, is important, but it's also really heavy, and we need a lot of it. Whereas food, we don't need, you know, it's certainly important. We don't need really as much food as we do water each day to function. You need about a gallon of water normally per day, which weighs 10 to 12 pounds. So storing up, you know, 5, 6, 7 days worth of water for 3 or 4 people, that's going to be enough. Imagine 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So, you know, the ways we can, you know, if you have a source of water that's available to you upon the stream, we have technology that can obviously filter that. So we just have to kind of judge for your own situation what kind of catastrophe you think is going to happen. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, during Katrina, our water system, I wasn't in Jackson. Was water okay?
I think some places.
So most places the water system doesn't go down. You might have a boil water notice, but usually the power grid or the gas and the electricity are down first. But still, water's important. So in the case that you had, you know, still had water, but it was a boil water notice, you know, here's a list of different things and the different kind of things that you're going to be filtering out. Starting with heavy metals, and then just dirt and muck, and then there's organic compounds which might get in the water like gasoline, pesticides, herbicides, all things that can be really toxic to you, that can kill you. And then you get into things like pathogens. Pathogens are, you know, small organisms, but pathogens are kind of a larger organism compared to viruses and bacteria. So if you start looking into all this kind of stuff that Roy's got up here, you're going to start seeing the word micron. Micron is how they measure the particle size for what it's filtering out. So you see filters that can do 1 micron, you know, 0.1 micron, 0.02 micron. That's going to be what you're going to want to look at. And so pathogens and the bacteria is even smaller. And you can kind of see the range on what you're going to need to filter out to the level that you want. Bacteria is what almost all filters will do. Your cheapest filters will usually aim for the bacteria at 0.2 to 0.6, but then after that you have to start adding chlorine and other things to kill the viruses, because the viruses are so much smaller than bacteria. But then you have other filters that are meant for the viruses, and it just depends on what you want to purchase and how much treatment you want to do to your water. So that kind of explains what you're going to, the kind of technical terms when you're looking at these filters. This is kind of a chart showing different, and it's probably hard to read, but I mean, it shows different things that might be in your water, and just kind of the size range that those things live in, and what kind of filter you're going to need to filter out. If you think that the water pressure is going to be fine, and that the plant is going to be up and running, but that it might be a boil water notice, and you just don't want to have to go to the hassle of boiling your water, or you don't have power, you don't have gas, and for some reason you don't want to have wood or whatever, an inline filter unit, a reverse osmosis unit can be what you want to buy. $150, $100 or so, it can do all your water for about a year. The reverse osmosis is top-notch filtering. It goes down to the virus level in many cases, but it requires water pressure. It requires that force to push the water through the membrane. The filters are pretty cheap. It's relatively expensive. It's a high flow rate. It's a normal flow rate. You know, so there's a lot of benefits, but you do need that water pressure. So that's kind of your system if you think you're going to be at home and you're going to have water but not power and not other fuel sources. So then there's other fuel systems that are called kind of gravity filtration. So this right here is probably one of the top of the line gravity filters. This is called a Berkey. What I've learned, Berkey is, everybody loves Berkey. So it kind of looks like these right here, and they're different sizes, and there's little filters in them that, and they make filters, and you just pour your water in here, and the water goes through the filter into here, and you just pour your water. This right here, you could pour anything, almost anything in it, including just viruses, and coming out of the bottom will be pure drinking water. It has some of the best filters, and this is probably about $225, $250. The filters replacements about $100, but the filters do 6,000 gallons, which is years and years of water. So, you know, $225, you can put almost anything in this thing. River water, standing water. You know, if you filter out some of the bigger stuff, your filter will last longer. But this is a good, this is a good fit. And it's called gravity because the gravity is pushing it through the filters. So it's a little slower than your osmosis version. But if you don't have water pressure, then this is kind of what you got to do. So like I said, they're not too expensive, and you can get different kinds of filters, ones that are as good as these, or there are different cheaper filters that might last you longer, that'll just do the bacteria, and if you have chlorine or iodine, you can do that treatment to the water. Then there's the other portable units, like Roy has here. These are all portable. You can pretty much stick them in the river and drink straight from them, or fill up some sort of canteen. A lot of them do, 1,000 gallons, some more. A lot of these, you just have to look at the micron rating for these. Most of them are at least 0.2, so we'll get most, if not all of your bacteria. Add a little chlorine, you're good to go. One of these will last a person probably a year, or if not more. So there's a ton of different brands. Right here I got LifeStraw, Sawyer, and a company called Lifesaver that's kind of in Europe. The Lifesaver can actually do bacteria. You got a little pump on it, and you pressurize it and push it through, and it'll do everything. So it just kind of depends on what you want. The Lifesaver, I don't know how much gallons. The Sawyer says it'll do 100,000 gallons. The Lifesaver, I think, about 6,000 liters. So you're carrying around, 6,000 gallons of water.
I think that the LifeStraw is like 200 gallons.
Okay. So depending on which one you get, you're carrying around hundreds, if not thousands.
The black one over there,
Gallons.
that's the pocket filter. I had down. That's good for up to 13,000 gallons.
So that's the kind of technology that we have. Ranging probably from $30 to maybe $100, $200 dollars, depending on what you want to do.
The LifeStraw, folks, you can get that for $20.
Yeah. So if you just want
Bass Pro or
keep this in your car, just in case, $20. If that's all you got, that's all at least you got something. Then there's other methods, and this is another kind of gravity filter, and I've kind of been looking at this. It's kind of interesting from a biological. It's called a biosand filter. Has anybody in the military built one of these, or do they use this? Anyway, it's kind of your own little personal homemade filter, and it kind of works like this one. But you're basically just stacking up aggregate in 2 5-gallon buckets, gravel, and then fine sand. And what it does is all the sand filters out the particulates. You can run it through multiple times. They'll have, if you get online, you can read about, depending on how much sand you have, it filters out more. It's a slow flow system, but after a while, when you start filtering more and more water through it, it builds up a layer of good bacteria. And the good bacteria will start attacking the bad bacteria. So even though you think you're filtering stuff through sand, it's going to, as it kind of saturates, they call it priming the system, it's going to develop a good bacteria layer, and you can pour water through that, and there's instructions online how to build it. And personally, I think that's a good way if you really had to go for nasty water. Build one of these for $10 and put it through this, so you're not, depleting the life of a good filter like this with all the kind of nasty stuff. When that sand, when it starts to get, really slow, you scoop off, a couple inches of that sand, add new, start priming the system again. The sand, you can find sand anywhere. They have instructions on how to do this, how to stuff, that you don't buy in the store. You can just go make it out of whatever sand you have available. Get back. Go back. Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's not set up.
Go up. Sorry.
When you store your water, you make sure you don't put it in plastic containers. because after a period of time, plastic will leach into your water. So make sure you put them in glass jugs or something that will not contaminate the long storage period.
And storage is a whole other area, and certainly storage is the hardest part because of the volume you require. There's all sorts of videos of there that are people that collect, that have, rainwater collection systems, that you can put on your house and store. All that's out there too, but that's a whole nother. To me, this is the easiest thing. First get something that's $20, so you got something, and then if you want to go even further, at least have something. Like you said, there's a lot of storage and collection is a whole nother.
In Mississippi, there's water everywhere.
Right, but like you said, having something at home so you don't have to go out when people are out is certainly a good thing. Having something so you can be at home and not have to go out is important as well. That more or less covers, like I said, water purification. If you don't have the big filters, there's chlorine, there's iodine, there's hydrogen peroxide. There's all sorts of different chemicals that can be used to kill the viruses. There's all different stuff you can buy out there. Chlorine obviously is over the shelf, but there's different grades of chlorine. Clorox is only a small percentage of chlorine, but you can buy tablets and things that are higher percentage chlorine. Same with iodine. So each different product you buy has a different amount per gallon that you're going to need to follow the instructions on how to use it.
Is there a survival store here in the Jackson area that has all this stuff in inventory?
I believe a lot of this stuff that's portable should be at Bass Pro Shop, Cabela's, Dick's, a lot of these small.
You want to go online, you can go to a company called Wise. They do a lot of dehydrated foods. They do all your filters.
There's tons of stuff. But
Tons of
even
companies.
Even just
I
Bass
just
Pro
wonder if there's
Shop.
someplace locally that we
Even
can
Bass
go
Pro
to.
Shop, Dick's.
Sam's Club has a 1 year. Yeah, Sam's Club has a 1 year food dehydrated food pack too.
So just to give you relative price, like I said, this system, and I encourage y'all to look at this. Everybody, from what I've seen, everybody loves this system. But I've found Sawyer makes a lot of good stuff too, and they sell it at Dick's and Academy Sports, and it seems to be very popular with hikers. And they do a lot of the small stuff. So just for an example, on Amazon, and I didn't have anything, but through doing this research, I decided to finally at least buy something. And I might buy something like this. But for $20 a piece, this thing right here will filter 100,000 gallons of water. It says we'll do it, that 100,000 gallons of water for 2 ounces and do 99% of all bacteria. Now, then I'd have to treat it, but it's literally about this size. So this is chlorine tablets, you're good to go for $20. So that's not bad. Same company makes different systems that are, getting your dirty water in one bottle and gravity feeding it into a different bottle through their straw system. With a better filter, they're saying they're going to do the viruses and the bacteria to 0.02 microns, so wiping out everything, so you don't have to add your chlorine. And that was $175. And it can do, I think they're saying 1 billion gallons. So when you're talking, you could have your whole community. And they make the same sort of system, kind of like this, where they give you everything but the 5-gallon bucket. So you just buy a 5-gallon bucket, and that's the kit to do your double bucket system, and filters to their filter, and does 0.02 microns, so you don't have to add chlorine. And that's $125 on Amazon. So for $100 to $200, you can be set up for your whole family, with nothing else you need but water. The water source that you need to get. So that's pretty much it.
I got a question. What are y'all, now this research, how safe is rainwater?
It'll have some, it's pretty safe. More or less you could drink it, and more than likely be safe.
An idea that someone passed on to me,
It's gonna have.
you get, it's inexpensive. If you gotta have a source of water purified, and you have to leave your house if you're not living at the reservoir or by a lake or a pond or something. But we have enough rain, you can always hope we're not gonna drought. You have to have other methods get a clean garbage can. But do not use on the top of it. When it rains, you go to the eave of your house, let the junk run off, off the stuff that's collected on the roof, runoff, put your garbage can up underneath there and catch it, and you can have a lot of water flow out. Now, it may need to be run through a system, but at least you got water.
That's a good source.
Yeah.
You have to be very
Because,
careful.
you know, I mean, in addition to drinking water, you need bathing water, you need,
It is something,
you need,
yeah.
you know, a gallon is what you need to drink, and you're talking about cooking. Depending on what food source you
Yeah,
have,
but dehydrated food,
you
it
need
takes
water to
water.
hydrate it, you need water to cook it, you know, all this kind of stuff. You can't imagine how many gallons of water you go through a day.
You do need to be careful what kind of plastic you use, what kind of bucket. There are very many different kinds of plastics. There are special FDA potable water grade plastic buckets and barrels that you can get, and they're even sourced where you can get them pretty cheap. You want to be really careful using the garbage can, because many garbage cans now have impregnated in them pesticides to keep down the vermin out of them. And so if you've got your water in that, that's all leaching into your water. So there's special bags, buckets, and stuff like this. If that's all you've got, get it, filter it. If you have to make your own homemade filter, but be really careful with a garbage can.
Any other questions?
There's a really good site on a computer called Pinterest. That's interest P, Pinterest. And it has all these different, I mean, everything from root cellars to all the filtration systems to how to make knives and how to make old flintlock. All the stuff that you need is on there. I spend an hour a night on it, wandering around out there, and it helps you be able to make things, you know, craft type stuff that you can use. You can make recyclable toilets. You can make air conditioners with solar panels from Harbor Freight. You know, a battery, a solar panel. You can charge all your stuff up with it. You know, it's not going to hold a big charge, but it's going to be able to give you stuff. But I talked about this before. My friend Chris, that you guys never get to see because he works all the time, he's a paramedic. He's got 10 acres out there in Clinton, and he's got access to 2 7-acre ponds. And he is a medical technician. He's a 25-year, EMT. And we have people like, we have people here that are medical trained. And I think that we should all be getting together and finding these places where multiple groups of people, if things go bad in the city, which in the city it's always going to go bad, that you can go and find people to group.
They want to do, and Matt's been reviewing them lately. The Department of Homeland Security has a large preparedness manual. And if you remember last month, Obama got on, it was National Preparedness Month, okay? And what you may find strange, but FEMA and DHS, they promote preparedness. They promote having food, having a way of processing water and safety. And they promote that, and they give you there's a huge amount of information there for you. If you go online and just do a search for the DHS Preparedness Manual, you can download it as a PDF, free.
Wow.
Another one is the LDS, the Mormon Preparedness Manual. That's not by the church itself, it's by an individual that's part of that church. And that is, Matt was just saying, that is one of the most thorough, detailed books of information on how to prepare and how to use things, how much food do you need, how much you need of this, how to store it. A wealth of information. You can get both of those free. I've got a list of primary articles and manuals and stuff that anybody wants to make a copy, we can get it, or maybe we can find a place on the website we can stick it and people just download it. I don't know how you're going to do that. Out of the DHS manual, here's a basic preparedness kit list. Okay? It's not complicated. And that's one thing I want to say it again. Preparing to weather the storms that are coming at us of whatever sort is not rocket science. To get in the details of doing it elaborately, yeah, it can, but it can also be as simple as a bucket with some holes in it and a bunch of sand in the bottom. it's not real complicated, especially what we have in this country. We're so resource rich. And it's in the head more than anything else. It's in your mind. The people that survive are the people that believe they can. And old and young, sick and well, smart and dumb, rich and poor, that every class survives through these things. So there's no reason you can't either. So I've got copies of this if you want that, and I guess we can close, and if you got any questions, I'll get them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roy. Thank you, Matt. There's a lot of information up there, and